I'm here with Will Durham with the ABoR Realtors. Will, how are you doing today?
Doing very well, Ryan. Great to be here.
Well, Will and I have known each other for a long time. I was on the board of directors for a couple of years, and even before that, I think we knew each other. But today we're asking about photography rules and how agents cannot get sued. We just had a photographer on. We're going to mix these two videos together, trying to get the best content. So let's take it from the top and tell us what you know. First of all, what is the law called, and what are the rules behind all this?
So fantastic questions. This is obviously a super important topic for a number of reasons, because everybody loves the photos. They're a huge point for marketing the listing. And from our side of things on the MLS, working with agents and brokers, we want to make sure you all have as much clarity as possible to understand how to properly navigate using photos, copyright usage. There's a number of just elements that get complicated quickly just due to all that legal fun there. But really what it comes down to from our side of things when it comes to photos is just understanding who truly does own those photographs. Whenever we have these conversations with brokers and agents and they say, hey, I have these photos, I got it from here, I got it from there, whatever it may be, we do our best to unpack and say, where did you get those photos? Who owns them? And even that question can be tricky for a number of people. They say, well, I got them from a photographer, or I took them, or whatever the reasoning may be. And so really, and from how we look at it, again, from kind of a copyright side of things within the MLS, best practice, call it the safest measure, is you shouldn't be inputting any listing photo into the MLS that you don't know the proper ownership, whether it's yours or somebody, a photographer, for example, you're working with that has given you that proper license. So that's kind of a high level overview when we talk about photos. And again, when I have these conversations one-off, that initial question is, who owns these photos that you're working with? Let's work backwards from there and see if we are clear that you are good to use these photos within the MLS or otherwise.
Okay, so I think there's a confusion. Partly where the confusion comes in is that you guys have a list of vendors on ABoR site that are well, tell us what that list, what they have agreed to do on that list.
Yeah, absolutely. So great resource and reference for you all. That is our ABoR MLS Verified Photography Partner Program. It's kind of a mouthful, but verified is kind of the word that we like to lean on. Verified photographers there. So this is a group of local photographers who have entered into a specific agreement with photographer and MLS as the kind of a two-party agreement there. Really what that agreement is designed to do and what it does is to simplify for agents and brokers who owns those photos and who is licensed to use the photos. So what that agreement says between the photographer and actress, the MLS, is that the photographer retains ownership rights of those photos, but the MLS does have a license to distribute those photos for advertising that property, that listing. And of course, those are input through the listing agent and or broker within that system. But what you'll find in that program are photographers who have entered into that agreement. And the goal and potential benefit of working with those is that it takes that first question we talked about a minute ago, where it says, who owns these photos? Out of the equation, it says the photographer owns them, you as the agent inputting them into the MLS has the license to distribute those photos on your behalf through the settings that you put in place. And we hope that it simplifies that licensing ownership side of things. That's what that program is designed to do. And any photographers you find on that PDF kind of on that sidebar there, those are ones who have entered into an active agreement with actress.
Gotcha. So, but what I think agents really need to know is that this does not give agents carte blanche to use those photos.
Correct. That's a great point.
Yeah. Because I mean, even one of my longtime photographers sent me an email that said, and I asked about it, but and they said, like, even if what we used to do before this became a problem was when we would renovate a duplex for someone or a house for someone, and we would get photos for when to lease them out for them. Well, if I use those photos again, I'm technically in violation of that if I don't get permission from the photographer.
Exactly. And that's a great use case there. And even one, you kind of make the assumptions, which I think is a takeaway, is ask the right questions at the right time to say, I got them for this specific listing presentation. here we are, whatever amount of months or years later it is, am I able to reuse this? You might have an agreement in place with that photographer where, for example, they transferred full ownership rights to you, but that should be very clearly laid out, that type of permission. And I think to your initial question, just because a listing photographer has their photos tied to a listing, it's in the MLS, they still own the ownership to those photos. And just because you can, right click save as from the MLS and put them onto your listing, that's not proper usage without that ultimate permission from the owner of those photos, which would most likely be a photographer in this case.
Right. And if a photographer, Tyler, that we interviewed earlier, he said that, you could have a photo that you put on in like Austin Home Magazine, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't have your agreement laid out, you can get into big time trouble with that, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to put it on a billboard, right? He said he's heard instances of photographers, basically sending an invoice, then a cease and desist, and then it just goes on for there. Mm-hmm. For my part of it, I'm going to be a little bit bold here, but if someone is taking a picture of a house that I list, and this is an opinion, okay, mm-hmm. They're not painting the Mona Lisa. Okay, mm-hmm. I'm paying for the photography on it. It's not cheap, right? Mm-hmm. So I have made the decision to tell my agents that, look, you need to make sure that you know what your licensing is, and that that you're not going to get in trouble for it, because we're not going to take the hit for it. And mm-hmm. I even go so far to say, why, if there's photographers out there that are going to give you the rights to those photos, why not use them? I think this has become a little bit of an ambulance chasing thing. And anybody that's watching this, I would love to hear your opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Put a comment in the comment section below. I want to hear what others have to think about it. But when it comes to, I remember there was I think when I was maybe on the board of directors, do you remember the case where they had these people in Houston that had a big development, and I think they put out this 100-page list of photos of each unit. Do you remember that? And it was a huge lawsuit.
Yeah, and it's, it kind of gets, I'll admit, kind of blurred with a number of other long-standing photography lawsuits. There's a number of different angles where really, I'm glad you're having this conversation, especially with your team, of just talking out, not making any assumptions, because there are a lot of claims made, whether they're valid claims or not. That's a different story for the legal teams to dive into. But but yes, that's why it is the utmost important to be very clear and not just pull random photos from random places and say, oh, I found it in a public domain, so it must be good for the public to use. Do the work up front. It's going to save you a lot of headache and heartache potentially in the long term.
Do you know what the penalty is for per photo violation?
So with us, we, from the MLS side, we are mostly on education and just enforcement in terms of getting it correct, get that photo removed, make sure the proper owner understands, do our best to track it down or remove it in that case. So we wouldn't have any strict, fines or anything like that immediately. If we saw a repeat violation of a specific broker.
I'm not talking about you guys. I'm talking
just in general.
Yeah, but like, what are people having to pay out? I mean, obviously people are going to go after the big guns like Zillow, which they did. Mm-hmm. That was settled. But like, instant cases of single agents getting sued. If all of this probably out of court, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because whoever is citing ownership of that and really their creative work there, they could put any dollar amount or whatever they can say, I'm owed this much heartache or financial restitution just because of XYZ, and that's they can spell up a claim. Whether it sticks the landing or not is a different story. But it's that's why we're so we want to just talk about it so much and have those resources available to play it safe whenever you possibly can, because somebody can make an extraordinary claim, and who knows, maybe they land something close to that. So that would be a wide spectrum of what they could say. And locally, we've had like disputes, the photographer and the new listing agent, because the photographer has ownership, we connect them and they figure something out. They say, pay me this flat fee, or, I'll take new photos and figure that out. And fortunately, it really does resolve in that case at most times, and it's able to work out. So it's, that's where that conversation begins, though, in terms of who owns those photos and what claims they're going to make, for what they need to get in return for it.
So I want to go over something else that I think agents need to realize. And at this point, I would think that most people know this, but you know, we're real estate agents, right? So it is what it is. But so this used to happen all the time. I haven't seen it happen. I quit selling real estate last year, but I get an email from an agent. They wanted to use my listing. They want to use my listing photographs to rent the property out, or possibly even to sell the property, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you know, 5-10 years ago, before all this became prevalent, it was the opinion of myself and probably a lot of others that, like, if you gave them permission, then they could do it. But that is not the case, right? Right. And I think the last time I had someone email me that and they wanted my permission, I said, well, you have my permission, but it's not my permission you need.
Right. That's a good way to put it. And that's, yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably one of the most common misconceptions we see about, you know, oh, that it was the previous listing agent's listing, which in a number of ways, and, you know, from the broker side of things, that's y'all's listing, that's your presentation of it, you know, the remarks and all that creative control that you've had over that and put it there. But photos are kind of a unique, you know, a unique thing compared to some of that, because anytime you bring in, call it a second party or a third party, that photographer, in most cases, that agreement between you as the broker and or agent and that photographer, just in addition to how the verified MLS program says, here's agent and MLS, what happens here, I'm sorry, yeah. Photographer and MLS, here's what agent and photographer have laid out. You need to stick to what's documented there. And if it needs to change, then have that conversation. But to your initial point, whoever owns those photos is going to be the one that permission needs to come from, whether or not somebody else used them and it's licensed in a different way. Yeah. Not necessarily theirs to say, yep, you can go ahead and use it. You need to do the back work on making sure it's in the right hands.
Gotcha. So here's what I want for the takeaways, and just add to it if you have any. One, if you're a real estate agent that is hiring a photographer to list the property, number one, make sure you know what that licensing agreement is. Do you have use of that continually? In most cases, it's going to be no, right? Mm-hmm. And you need to know that if you use them again, you have to probably pay a licensing fee, okay? Number two is that, you know, you can look for a photographer that will give you the rights to those photos. Mm-hmm. We just interviewed one. Number three, if you're a agent that is emailing a listing agent that had photos before, that listing agent does not have the right to give you permission to that, okay? And I think that agents will need to know all three of those things. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that agents need to know about photography? Well, for one thing, what about like Instagram? Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, that's a totally different medium than how I've been trained to think about these photos and copyrights. Yeah. I would fall, again, this is an area where you want to play it safe, not make any assumptions, not take any risks. Just, you know, and on that, let's take that Instagram example. It's getting out there. If you don't have the proper ownership, and it could be made that you're having monetary gains from somebody else's creative works, that's where it gets sticky, and that's where you'd want to, you know, get ahead of anything like that. And again, you know, if working with that photographer, to kind of add on to what you have, I mean, I think the recap is all of those takeaways and principles. Just verify who has that ownership, and the last listing agent may have been the photographer using a nice phone or even a nice camera. And, you know, in that case, if they can fully claim ownership, and yes, it was it never left their hands, so to speak, in terms of that, then yeah, that's where it is. But yeah, I mean, I think your takeaways were spot on. And again, just to add, don't make any assumptions, and play it safe, and do the due diligence anytime you're talking about, call it recycling photos or trying to see a new licensing application to it. Yeah, it's worth the extra effort up front.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Will Durham, Austin Board of Realtors.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's been a pleasure.
What do you need to know about real estate photography so that you do not get sued? What do you need to know about choosing a photographer where you can use the photos again and again, or at least know your rights and how not to trigger a lawsuit from a photographer? We're going to talk about this today. I'm interviewing Tyler Jackson with Optico Real Estate Services. I'll be interviewing Will with the Austin Board of Realtors in the mix of this, and we're going to give you a lot of information about real estate photography and how to use it. Tyler, thanks for being our guest today. So, one of the big topics here, first of all, let's learn a little bit about you. Your company is did I say that right? Optica?
Yeah, Optica Photography Services, or Optica Real Estate Photography Services.
Okay.
And, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Sure. What kind of photography do you do for real estate agents? Are you doing wide angle lenses, HDR? Just tell me what you're doing with that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's strictly real estate photography for basically any platform, MLS, and then onto wherever.
Okay.
But it's wide angle shots, HDR, so you can see the interior and the exterior evenly.
Mm-hmm.
Try to keep it as minimal and bright as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Make all the spaces look really appealing and
Yeah.
inviting.
And you do editing post?
Yes, I edit.
Okay. And the reason we came about, I think, talking to each other, I think you had already done some work for other real estate agents, and I think at the time I had some one of my photographers, who I've known for a long time, he's actually a friend, but I got a message from them that they want to license the use of photography, even if we're going to use it again. And I think I asked you about that. We just had a meeting at our like 2 months ago at our with our brokerage, and just went over it. It's like, if the copyright law says whoever takes the photograph owns the photograph, right? But we're not painting the Mona Lisa here.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, and these pictures aren't cheap, and I am of the mindset that if I'm paying for photos on a property, I don't want to worry about getting sued for that.
Right.
And so it's what's happening in our industry right now is photographers are suing. Zillow had a big lawsuit. I think Redfin might have had too, and they changed the way everything was done. What is your stance on photography for real estate agents?
So, I mean, it's obviously a really complex issue, so I try to simplify it. My take is I'm somebody who has worked for hire for agents.
Yeah.
Meaning that I'm providing a service for agents that they can use however they want to.
Right.
And I also see it from a personal stance that it's not worth my time to come after photos after I've given them to agents. I've got better things to do.
Yeah.
I'd rather spend my time personally trying to market myself, trying to get new clients, trying to better my skills so I can take better photos in the future, instead of chasing down some old photos and then trying to wring out a few bucks, or making an agent fear that they might have a lawsuit or that they've done something wrong. I think the last thing I would want to do is make a client feel that they've done something wrong.
Yeah. And it's a little bit like ambulance chasing, kind of, or driving around a traffic circle waiting to get into a wreck.
Definitely.
So you can sue them. That's not what you do. And I think what the mindset from photographers, which, I think I can see a little tiny piece of it, but not that much. And what I mean by that is, look, if you're taking, downtown landscapes, and you're selling those to Shutterfly or whatever. Is it Shutterfly? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Shutterfly. That's your photograph, right?
Right.
But when you're doing something for a home, I think that real estate agents should not have to worry about getting sued. And this is what you messaged me was very timely. I think what I asked were, when we take photos, if we use you to take photos, then are they ours? Right? Yes. Because the person I talked to, who we've been using for years, again, I really like the guy, but I talked to someone at his office and he said, okay, I said, well, look, can we use these on Instagram? Well, yeah, you can use it on Instagram. We're not going to come after you. But if you use it again, like what we used to do is we take photos when we help someone buy a duplex, for instance, right? We would take photos of it and we would rent them out after we renovate them, and then we'd put them for lease. Well, what I've heard is that I need to pay from my preferred photographer for almost a decade, not him, someone at his office. and that I need to pay a licensing fee to reuse that. I just don't get it. Okay, I don't get it. Like I said, these are duplexes. They're not that great. This isn't, in my opinion, this is not art. Okay, I mean, there's an art to it, but it's not.
It's not.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, how do you handle the licensing on that?
So, yeah, like as you said, once you pull the trigger on the camera, press that button, that copyright is the photographer's.
Yeah.
But I consider myself work for hire, meaning that I'm providing a product to you and you can use it for, whatever you want, as many times as you want.
Yeah.
And I think it's so crazy.
Yeah.
That I listened to another podcast. I talked to a bunch of real estate photographers around the nation, just on Facebook, and a lot of them are obsessed with the idea of copyright.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's bad business practice, personally. I think there's other things you could worry about.
Yeah. I was going to ask. So a lot of them are, but do some of them care?
I'm kind of in the minority here.
Well, okay.
So a lot of people do care a lot more than they should.
Well, let me tell you what I do think is an issue. Okay. And this is a very valid issue, is that, let's say I'm a listing agent. You come and take photos for me. Okay. A buyer's agent helps the buyer buy that property. 2 years later, they want to sell it. They call and they ask me if they could have my permission to use those photos. Well, it's not my permission they need. It's the real estate photographer. Okay. Mm-hmm. I do get that part of it. Okay. I don't necessarily agree with it. It's not that I disagree with it. I think it's kind of like what you said. Why are you wasting your time doing that? What is your job, right? Your job is to go and take photos. Let's make the most of it. Let's brand yourself, So that part of it I understand. But I just want to have no holds barred worry about one of my agents taking that photo and putting it on Instagram, it being on my website, any of these other issues. I mean, there was a company in Houston that got sued to hell and back because they used photographs on their website of an upcoming development. I mean, it was a huge lawsuit, right? Mm-hmm. And I just don't want to worry about this. So what I would tell agents out there is to work with a photographer like Tyler, who's going to allow you to own those photographs, so you don't have to worry about it.
Right. It's kind of like you said about ambulance chasers. There are attorneys who love to go into litigation for copyright. Yeah. And then that kind of encourages real estate photographers, or any type of photographer, but since we're talking about real estate, it encourages them to, get on with that. And
they see the extra source of income.
Right. I just don't know why you would want to potentially burn a bridge with an agent. So let's say I shoot photos for you as a listing agent, and 6 or 8 months later, you use them for whatever, a billboard on the side of a bus, some flyers, or they end up somewhere else that's not MLS or Realtor.com or Zillow. Yeah. And in your inbox, there's an invoice. I send you an invoice for what I think is the right amount of money I deserve to be paid. Right. That's awkward.
Yeah, it's awkward.
That's really weird, and that's kind of. Does that make you want to hire me again?
No.
Absolutely not.
No, and I would spread the word about that.
Right. And let's say I'm really serious about this. You don't pay that invoice. I follow up again. Say I send you a cease and desist from an attorney. Are you going to hire me? Absolutely. No. It's done. And not only that, my name is tarnished for anybody else that you talk to.
That's right.
But this is a lot of people's way.
Have you known anybody that has gone after, or have you talked to anybody that's gone after real estate agents for this type of stuff?
I've talked to people not in Austin, but that have definitely done the invoice thing I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And
what are they getting out of it? Are they getting money out of it, or?
I think sometimes, but also when they threaten with legal stuff, it's just I'd rather take that time and then pack my day with a few more photo shoots with new clients. Yeah. And then that can spread even further. They can share my name. Also, okay, let's say you do use my photo on whatever, print media or a billboard or anything. Somebody's likely to ask you who took that photo. Right. Then you can recommend me.
Yeah. No, you make a completely valid point in that, is that a big piece of that, I mean, you're getting photographs that are done for, advertisements on print. all the time, you know, and that you can't take that down like you can a Facebook ad.
Right.
I think it's a big problem, and I think that photographers really need to think about what it is they do. You know, again, I'm not talking about, you know, going out and taking, you know, skyline photos or the hike and bike trail or anything like that. Those, I completely agree. That's true art, right? And I would encourage any photographer that's out there that's getting those to, you know, taking those photos, that make sure that you do protect that art, because it's right. I mean, I remember probably 15 years ago, I built a website, and I had a young guy that built a website, and he took a photo of blue moon. It was the blue moon over Austin, I think it was, right? And the photographer, at the time, I sold my real estate company, my property management company, and the photographer, I think he asked me for like $4,000 for it.
Jeez.
Now, I didn't know that he had done this. Now, mind you, I agree. Okay, that was a beautiful photo that it should not have been taken without permission. He had some kind of software out there, but I was like, look, dude, this company's closing down. I'll sell all the accounts. I'll give you $500, or you can just sue me. You can sue the company's no longer in existence. Yeah. And I paid him $500 for it, right?
Yeah.
So there's validity to that. But to this notion of a home interior, exterior photos, they're my photos. That's the way I think about it. And I really like that you think about that way as well. What other services do you provide? Do you do any drones services yet?
Yeah, I've got my drone license, so I do that as an add-on.
Okay.
And then I do 360 tours that are specific for Zillow. Zillow has like an app, and I'll do that.
What are you using for the tours for the 360?
I use a Ricoh Theta Z1.
Okay.
It's like a little 360 camera.
Yeah.
You can use your phone. I think it looks really bad with the phone, and a lot of it's kind of wonky too. Like things don't line up as well.
Yeah. Are people requesting the 360 tours as much as they were when COVID happened?
No, definitely not in my opinion. I used to use this software called Matterport.
Yeah.
And I mean, you probably know about Matterport.
Yeah, of course.
And it's you have to pay monthly for a subscription. And just people, I went multiple months with people not requesting that.
Yeah.
And then I had some people ask me about a different type of cheaper tour, and I was like, okay. So I asked other real estate photographers in other markets, and they said, start doing the Zillow one, charge half the price.
Yeah.
And then you can do it more. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So.
Well, okay, I want to hear from anybody who's listening to this on a podcast or watching this on YouTube. What do you think about this issue with photography? Should real estate agents own them or not? Maybe I'm wrong. I want the viewers to come in, comment, you know, let me know what they think. If you're watching this and you're a photographer, set me straight. I want to hear it. Let's see what you have to say. So where can people find you?
Like online?
Yeah.
They can find me on my Instagram at optica.photo.
Optica.photo.
Or just go into Google and type in Optica Photography Services. I'll pop up.
Okay, awesome. Is that your do you have a website on Optica?
And my website is optica-photo.com.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for your input today, and you will be on my approved vendor list for my agents.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.